We've been hearing in China that the death count from the coronavirus has now passed the 500 mark, and there are still just 2 confirmed cases here in the UK.
Some people in Britain's Chinese community say they are being treated with fear, suspicion, or even hostility because of the outbreak.
Let's talk to Sam Phan, who's a student from Manchester, and Billy Hui, who is a presenter on BBC Radio Merseyside. Good morning to you both. Billy, I'm interested in what you've been experiencing at the moment, because we're saying that now there is fear, which whenever there's a virus, we've got the history of SARS, so people are very mindful of that. But the fear is emanating in a way that's isolating or making some people feel as if they're being singled out.
Yeah, there's pockets of that. Certainly on Merseyside, there's pockets of that where I've had incidents of school children, primary school children, being picked on or people not talking to them in primary schools. I've heard of an incident where there's been a Chinese lady who regularly attends a gym and has been told to move into a far corner while she's exercising.
And have people been explicit when, I mean, it's children, they can be cruel. And they hear things, obviously, from adults.
Absolutely.
But say, for example, with this Chinese lady in the gym, or the woman of Chinese heritage in the gym, was she told, you move away because I think you might have SARS?
Yeah.
Or, coronavirus?
Coronavirus, absolutely. And it's there's been, like I said, incidents like that. It's very few and far between at the moment, what I've heard. But I think the underlying fear or concerns with coronavirus stemmed from a lack of information when it first broke, and with that gap, as we're all human, so it's we tend to fill that gap with information wherever it comes from, or we end up coming up with it ourselves. And it was that not misinformation, but lack of information at the beginning that caused people to have these fears, and especially on Merseyside, once we knew that the people from who'd been evacuated from Wuhan were in a Merseyside Wirral hospital, which I incidentally only live 5 miles away. So I've heard all sorts of different opinions.
And you're talking, of course, about where they're being kept in quarantine.
Yes.
So, Sam, you're a student.
Yes.
So what's your experience?
So on campus, there has been a lot of fear against international students who come. The majority of international students do come from China, and so I've heard this discourse where home students are afraid to go to university libraries because they're worried about, being infected by the virus, or just kind of this talk about, being worried about spending time with Chinese people just in case.
Are you having these conversations with people?
So some of my friends who aren't Asian at all will send me screenshots from their group chats and with housemates or flatmates, and they're kind of seeing this kind of anti-Asian sentiment almost, where there's this kind of fear of Chinese people.
What's the message that's being disseminated from university, from the authorities in the university?
I think because, like you said, I think there's a lot of false news circulating around the coronavirus. So I think that panic has created this atmosphere of fear where people are kind of scared of.
So what happens then in the library?
Yeah.
An international student goes into the library. Is it the incident like the lady in the gym? Are they pushed to one side, or are people moving away from them in the library?
So I've had a friend who's British Chinese, and she was sat in the library. She said as soon as she sat down, the person opposite her moved away from her. I've also had incidences where I've been on a bus and people have moved away from me, and yeah, I've been made to feel like I'm part of a disease mass.
And have you seen that? Have you literally seen that as this story has people known more about it, seen more about it? You really noticed the change, a tangible change.
100%. I think racism has existed in society as with many other countries and other nations. I think that this has almost shone a spotlight onto the anti, or not, I don't want to say anti, but kind of just even if it's in banter or in jokes, this kind of jokes about Chinese people being infected, it's kind of, created that
How does that make you feel? Like today, you've come on the sofa to talk about it. Brilliant, because we can hopefully educate some people who just obviously aren't listening or doing the right research. How does that make you feel? Like when you leave this studio, you're going to go out. I'm assuming you're going back to uni and you're going to study, or when you're walking around, how does that make you feel?
I think it's kind of sad because as a British Chinese, I do see Britain as my home, and to have to feel uncomfortable in my own home, or as if I've kind of been, or to have been made to feel as if I'm a threat to other people around me, it kind of makes me a bit sad.
I suppose in a way, Billy, and it's very difficult hearing, first-hand accounts of something that's happening to someone and how that feels. But if someone's listening to this, looking for some justification in why they're looking at someone, this coronavirus comes from an identifiable place, which is China. And people might be thinking, if they're looking for justification for the way they're feeling, they maybe just think, well, I'm just being honest. I'm just thinking, I connect it with China. These people appear to have Chinese origins. By way of justification, that might be the thought process. And, that's difficult, isn't it? It may well be wrong and clearly irrational, but it's difficult.
It is very difficult because it does stem from there. It has spread very quickly as well. And especially with, like I said before, with the people that have been quarantined being in the UK and in our area here as well, in the Northwest. It is difficult. I can understand fully why people would think that. I'm not saying it's right, but I can understand fully why those feelings would potentially come out.
Wouldn't it be more understandable if there was a white person or a black person or an Indian orange person who's come from China to then say, oh, I'm a bit wary of you, regardless of the colour of your skin or where it looks, rather than looking at a British Chinese person and saying, oh, well, you've got a bit of Chinese in you, so, automatically you're linked. That's where the ignorance is, though, isn't it? You understand people who, if they're upset because they've come from Wuhan or that region, or China, even Southeast Asia, but not just because it's your heritage.
No, absolutely, because I'm British-born Chinese. I haven't been to China or Hong Kong, anywhere near there for what must be 15 years now. So if anything's directed towards me, I would find that very, very sort of surprising.
It's offensive.
It is offensive. It is offensive. And for the people that have been over to Hong Kong or China or anywhere, certainly if they've been near the epicenter as well in Wuhan, there's a cultural thing with Chinese people, certainly of sort of like the generation, our parents' generation, my parents' generation, is that the self-isolation thing. This is a sort of a phrase that we've seen pop into the media, pop into the news over the last week or so. The self-isolation thing is something that's built in almost to Chinese culture. So those people that may be at risk because they've travelled back from China will keep themselves and lock themselves in the house. So, and then the people who are going around their business, mostly, I would say, British-born or British Chinese people like me and Sam, just going about our business. And I think Sam's had it more for some reason than I have.
What do you mean?
I'm not too sure if it's geographic, that Sam's experienced firsthand, seeing this in the library we've just mentioned. I travel around, I see lots and lots of Chinese people. It's been Chinese New Year recently as well. And working, sort of with local communities and seeing lots of people all the time. I haven't had this first-hand experience yet of somebody saying, I'm not going to sit next to you, or I haven't had this.
And also, you might have hoped that in a university environment, people possibly would have, taken the trouble
to research,
to think more carefully about the implications. Thank you for coming in and sharing your experiences. Good to see you both this morning.
I hope people will have watched and just think, and you don't have to feel sad.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate you guys spending the time to edit this and talk about it. Thank you very much.
Sam, Billy, thank you.
Thank you.
7:47 is the time now.